Everyone, if you're just joining us, we're going to give everyone just about another minute or so to hop on, and then we'll get started. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome everyone. Happy first day of Circular City Week, New York. My name is Rich Grousset, and if you're here for the panel about switching to reusables in large food service operations, you're in the right place. Again, my name is Rich Grousset. I'm moderating today's discussion. I began my reuse career about 10 years ago and have the great pleasure of now serving as Redish's head of sustainability. Redish is a Brooklyn-based company that provides reusable products as a service. So essentially, like to-go containers and cups, we provide these things to organizations like large workplace cafeterias, K through 12 schools, and similar situations. Similar to a linen and uniform service, we deliver clean, collect dirty, wash in our own facility, and repeat. So you might notice my background right now is not an office looking environment. I'm actually coming to you today from our facility, and you'll get the bonus of a quick virtual tour before I go ahead and do our housekeeping and panel introductions. So let me just do that real quick, and hopefully the technology will work and my mic will switch to my headphones, and yeah, let's give it the old fingers crossed. So far, so good. So this is gonna be the really brief version. So you're not gonna see everything, but here behind me, you're gonna see some dish machines. And I'm gonna start with the first one here. This was where Redish began over a year ago. This is our first machine here. And like I said, I'm gonna go quickly. An Ecolab machine. I'm gonna navigate, I'm trying to go backwards, navigate around here. And then behind me on this side, you're gonna see stacks and stacks of products ready to go out to clients. Some are already packed in totes. Some are on shelves waiting to be packed on totes. Our reusable round trip totes are these colored boxes you see here behind me. So quickly, that's all waiting to be used. And then I'm gonna go around this way. Here you see, we started using these for our clients to return their containers to us on their loading docks. And then I'm gonna go around backward this way. This is our new Pride and Joy. It's all set up, waiting to go. A few minor things need to happen, and then we're gonna be up and running on this giant machine to give you perspective against the one we started on. And this one is at spec, can do like 10,000 products per hour. So we're very, very excited, and we're ready to conquer, you know, just all the reusables in New York City, right? So that's kind of the insight into what circular economy or infrastructure is starting to look like all over the country, and ours is right here in Brooklyn. So yeah, you can kind of see the old machine next to the new one. It's quite a difference. So I said it was brief. That's it. So we have a lot to talk about. So let me get to it. Now I'm going to try the trick of plugging back in so you hear the new mic. Okay. Hopefully that's all working. Again. One moment. There we go. Sorry. Otherwise my laptop will be quitting on us in the middle of this thing. Okay, now we're back at it. Housekeeping. All right, so today's discussion, you know, it's already 6 after. we're going to try to get to our discussion as quickly as possible. And we do want to try to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. My colleague, Nicole Grossberg from Redish, will be tracking questions in the Q&A. So as we're going along here, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. And then she'll track all those, and when we get to the end, she'll pull the best questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Feel free to use the chat function. I see that's already happening. Just make sure you select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments to each other. And lastly, we are recording this webinar, and we'll send out an email at some point in the next week or so with the link to the recording. So if you missed anything, or you can share it with other folks. So now soon I'll stop talking, and hopefully our great panelists will do most of it. It's my great pleasure to introduce our fantastic panelists. You can come back on screen now, please, if you don't mind. In alphabetical order, we have Jenny Garcia from the Walt Disney Company, Jenny Igoe from Lifeworks Restaurant Groups, and Ushma Pandy from Think Zero LLC. So now I'd just like to ask you each to take about a minute, minute or less, 30 seconds if possible, and just tell us who you are, your job title, organization, and importantly, like what kind of large food service operations you're working with now or have worked with in the past, because like Ushma is a consultant, so she's seen lots of different sites. So go ahead, Jenny. Jenny G.
I am good old muted. Isn't that the story of the past 2 years of our lives? I'm Jenny Garcia. Pronouns are she, her. I am with the Walt Disney Company, and I work within corporate real estate operations in New York City. So our Disney HQ here in New York City supports many of our segments, but most notably ABC, WABC, ESPN, and corporate. I do love my job and my role within corporate real estate. I'm lucky enough to lead our hospitality project management, our events and conferences, food services from catering, cafes, our corporate internal communications, our DEI programming, and what I'm here to talk about today, probably my favorite thing, sustainability. So in addition to leading sustainability for corporate real estate, I'm also the chair of our employee resource group, the Disney New York City Green Team. So prior to my time with Disney, food service operations, everything from coffee shops to nightclubs to lounges to speakeasies and restaurants. And I ended up in hotels in 2012. And I've been with Disney for 3 years, and it's been quite the ride.
Thank you. That's great. And how about you, Jenny I?
Hi, my name is Jenny Igoe. I'm a district manager with Lifeworks Restaurant Group, which is the premium brand within the Aramark Corporation. My current role, I'm a district manager for the JP Morgan business, which has accounts all across the US and some in the UK. And so my role is to manage the food service with our clients from JP Morgan throughout the US and the UK. And obviously, as Jenny's already mentioned, sustainability is a huge topic for them, and really excited to talk about that today.
Excellent. Ushma, how about yourself?
I tried to unmute myself and I put myself back off camera. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Rich, for inviting me to be on this panel with these amazing women. I like an all-women panelist group. My name is Ushma Pandy. I am a co-founder and partner at Think Zero LLC. We are a waste reduction and diversion advisory firm. So we work with many companies, many Fortune 50, 100, 500 companies on their waste reduction and diversion goals. And for us, reusables is a really key part of the conversation that we have with clients, such as Disney. And so I work with a lot of corporate cafeterias and food halls and pantries are areas that I work with that would be applicable to this conversation. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad everyone's joining us today.
Me too. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And
myself as we have 67 people join so far. I know a few of those are Redish folks, but that's still a very good number. It's exciting. So apparently we have folks interested to hear what you all have to say, which is wonderful. I do want to get right into the conversation, but I do think it's helpful to clarify a little bit when we're talking about large food service operations. I'm sure many of the people on the attendees realize this, but there are a million different situations that food service operators can be in and serve, and we won't go through all of them here. But you know what we're talking about with large food service operations for the most part is your large corporate cafeterias, large schools like K through 12. Universities, you name it, even events, right, can fit in there. But really, you know, in most of the situations, most of what we're talking about today, right, applies to situations where it's what we call in reusables, it's become a thing, right? It's a more closed system. And so these are employee access only, right? Not open to the public, for example. And so, you know, stadiums, so you need a ticket to get in, right? And you can only get out one way. You know, so there are certain, and in schools, right? Most kids don't bring food home from schools, even though technically maybe they would be allowed to be, but, you know, so we consider this more of a closed system where things aren't leaking out a lot. That's very different from the restaurant scene, which I'm sure some folks listening in are working on solving that problem, and where people can get their food and go anywhere in the world afterwards. It's a whole different ballgame to try to get reusables working. So I think, did I get that about right, everyone, as far as like setting the context about the type of, okay, excellent. All right, so I'm only a few minutes behind. That's great for me because I tend to talk too much. So let's start, and we'll start in the same alphabetical order this time around. So we'll start with Jenny G, and then the way we'll do this is if she missed anything or if you have additions or comments, great. But in order for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next question and we'll start with someone else. So the big first question is, based on your experience, Jenny G, like what are the most important factors driving the switch to reusables in large food service operations?
It's definitely a big question, and I thought a little bit about this morning, and I couldn't find the right answer, so I'll try really hard. I think that in large food service operations, but also in our daily lives, the data, the science, the research, we're in a climate crisis, and it's time to get solution oriented. And one of the most important solutions to climate change is a circular economy. And I truly believe that the biggest way we can impact change through food services is waste reduction all around, you know, focusing on food waste, and then adopting reusables all around. And we just need to move away from this throw out, buy one, buy new, and become a culture of renew, reuse, return. And Redish is just that, right? And that's how we got connected, Rich, through Ushma. And for me, the circular economy is driving this important change. That is the key factor, for at least for us at Disney.
That's great. And how about the Jenny I or Ushma? Do you want to add on to that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. But I think it's like everything, right? To Jenny's point, convenience. We've got used to everything just being given to us and available immediately. And I think it's about shifting that focus, but how can we still make it convenient for the guests coming in? And I think Redish is a perfect example of that. That's the only additional thing that I would add.
I mean, I talk to a lot of companies, you know, and because I'm talking about waste reduction and diversion, I usually lead with the topic of sustainability in terms of if you're trying to reduce your waste reduction, you know, if you're trying to increase your diversion numbers, this is a good way to do it. So that's the primary lens that we're using in, but really the second and third areas are around cost, look, feel, ethos, culture. I do find that talking about it from a perspective of a better dining experience resonates with some, you know, companies, not all, but those who want to provide a different experience, that also goes into place, but all of them then do come down to cost as well.
That's great. And I kind of have a million questions about this, but we do need to move along. I will ask one, I'm always curious about this. We do see a lot of emphasis on sustainability and ESG goals and rating systems. It's been in the news, especially a lot this past year. Do we see that filtering down, do you think, into the decision? Is that driving, the decision to look at food service operations more in general in sustainability, and also, the products, like is that pushing to drive for which product you use, whether it's single use, reusable, other, right? Like is that pressure being felt all the way down in these kind of decisions, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And that's open to anyone.
100%. It's not just about what type of products we use, it's where they're from, where they're being sourced, who's making them, how are they arriving, right? So the goal is always keep it local, and that's it, right? If you keep things local where they've always belonged, then you don't have this huge impact on our global climate economy, I guess you would say.
Oftentimes when you look at ESG reports, the major data that's in them related to waste reduction and diversion is from the haulers. How much was landfilled, how much was diverted. So if you're able to make the case between, this is the volume, I think we've done this, Jennifer, like what is the volume that's coming out of a cafeteria from the single-use plastic? It's low weight, but high volume, right? A little bit of the trick there is hauler data is volume-based, weight-based. So there could be a lot of plastic clamshells, but it doesn't weigh that much, right? So, but what we at Think Zero has found, because we've done some work with companies on what is the evolution of waste reporting, is that now companies are trying to dimensionalize that data by giving stories. So the idea of showing, having the verbal story in the sustainability report that we've switched to all reusables, or we do all compostable, whatever it is, that's valuable. But the pure data itself is sometimes, I think, a little bit harder to translate just because of the weight of food service.
Great. Jenny, did you want to touch on that, or did they? Okay, great.
Yeah, no, they've hit it again.
So, and I guess this time we'll start with Jenny I. The question is, like, when and how did reusables kind of first enter the conversation, for your organization, whether it was specifically your JP Morgan count or some before that, like at a larger conversation, when did that happen? Like, what was the genesis of that journey to considering reusables to begin with?
So a good question, and it's been a conversation that's been on the agenda for some years now, if you take out the last 2 years, even before that. So I think the biggest push originally and I'll just talk from my interactions with our client, was get rid of plastic. We don't want any plastic anywhere. And that happened in like the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, where we went all across the US and the UK, no plastic. So it was compostable, cans, glass bottles, everything, from catering to cafe. And then from that, it was the conversation of, well, what's next? How do we continue to improve? How do we continue to get better? And so we were ready to launch with a reusable concept, with a reusable program in just our one New York location as a pilot, beginning of 2020. And then 2020 happened and the years that followed that. And then we are now actually in a position, as Rich knows, to be launching at one of our New York locations next Monday, which I'm truly excited about. So in terms of giving you a time frame, it's been years, but really excited that we're now going to be implementing that at one of our large locations. And I think, decision making and how it came about, and it's just making sure you have the data and the information to talk through it. And again, the seamless guest experience. So when they're coming through your space, You know, there's no different for them in terms of the experience they're getting and the food they're taking home, and telling that story, that they're having a greater impact on the environment.
I couldn't ask for a better answer than that. That's great. And to keep us moving on time here, I'm gonna segue from that to ask Ushma. You've seen a lot of organizations considering all sorts of sustainability improvements in food service and in general in their buildings, but when it comes to considering reusables and switching from disposables, like who do you see typically at the table in that decision-making process? From starting with, this is an idea we should look at to let's commit to doing it. What kind of stakeholders are involved?
Well, stakeholders like Jenny G, right? So someone who manages the food service operations. Reusables, when I bring up reusables, I'm like, rah, the climate and the environment. But when I bring it up to someone, and that's all, I'm like, yeah, isn't that great? Like if you care about the environment, you care about reusables, chick, we don't have to talk about anything else. Just throw these out and put these in. But there's actually a lot of operational considerations to make this move. A really simple one is, do you have dishwashers? If you don't have dishwashers, how are you going to clean all those reusables? So, do you have all the pipings and stuff? And do you have the space to hold them? And how are you going to actually get them back? I mean, Jenny G was scouring Disney looking for plates. Like, where are those plates that were in my cafeteria? So there's a lot of logistics and operations. So I think you need a champion. What I thought was amazing is that I kind of threw out the idea to Jenny G. I think I'm going to call you Jenny G from now on. Jenny G. And it was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's pilot it. So you need a champion. You need to have someone who's willing to find the money and make a pilot. And I do think piloting is really important to test it out in small spaces. But then you really do need to work it through with anyone who is responsible for the operational part of food service. But then also you need to talk to someone who's on the client facing or guest facing, like how is that experience going to look and be? Because now you're going to ask people to behave differently. And you do need to work that through, because if the first couple of experiences are not great, this kind of makes it harder to move it forward, right? For example, the dishes should be clean. They should be easily picked up and easily returned. It shouldn't feel that much more different. So those would be the people that I want, I guess I'm emphasizing a champion, a back of service operations, and then a front of house, like guest experience. But I think, the two Jennies would know better of what it takes to implement it inside of an organization.
Yeah, so if one of the two of you would like to add anything to that, we're shockingly, I'm only like 1 minute off on time. So we can follow up on that if you'd like. Would either one of you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is, obviously you got to have your financial people that understand, that can answer the financial questions and make sure that it has the right impact on the business. And then I think 100% operationally, and obviously as a food service provider, what happens in your space, but then it's also working with the broader team within the buildings, facilities, the cleaning, ABM, or whatever the company is, that's also going to be working with you to collaborate and make sure this gets executed correctly. So I think, pulling in all of those leaders and all of those people, and then making sure you just spend the time, beforehand in the first few weeks, training, working with them, walking the floor, seeing their challenges, because there will be something that you've not thought of. And I probably can, give more experience about that next week after we've gone through our first week. But, it's trying to think of everything. You understand it, your brain and how your operation works, but there's also other people within the building that you need to collaborate with here. And I think just all being on that same page and talking through it, walking through it is really important.
Yeah, when, good question in the chat. When do folks like janitorial and property management, come into the conversation? If they do indeed come into this, I have to guess janitorial comes into the conversation quite a bit, because at some point, some of the stuff has to get moved around the building. And then there's always an building owner, unless you own the building as your organization, or a property manager. I guess, we'll keep with you, Jenny I. Do you see, when did they, in your current experience, because you're in the middle of this, about to launch, when did those folks kind of get into the conversation?
Probably once we'd agreed with ourselves and with our client that we were going to implement this. It was pulling that in pretty soon after that, just to understand their operational side of things, and making sure that there was additional bins we needed to order, and all of those things, and just making sure that we had time to train the team. So I think after the decision's made that you're going to implement it, and you have a date, I would say very quickly after that is how we did it, with pulling in janitorial and facilities, etc. In terms of pulling them in.
Great. Okay, so now I do have to move on so I don't get too far behind. Jenny G, we have a fun question for you. What are the primary concerns, that you had, or anyone else, has had in your experience during planning, planning and implementation? What comes up from all these folks?
I mean, that's a great question. So I think before I answer that question, I've probably, in any interview or any panel I've ever done, I say lean on the experts. Right. So at Disney, we have somebody like Sarah and Ushma from Think Zero. We have our amazing business partners, Flick, for our food services. We have you, Rich, and Redish. You're all experts in your own areas. Let the experts be the experts. That's how you run a solid operation. I think a lot of people that I've watched over, my 25 years in this industry lead is thinking that they know everything, and it's just not possible, right? So that's my first biggest piece of advice, just in general. I think there's a really long list of challenges when it comes to implementing reusables. I mean, you're looking at an entire culture shift, right? And like the playbook, it will list out all of the considerations I think that were mentioned, from janitorial to training the food staff to just getting them from one place to another. I really tend to focus on growth mindset and executive buy-in, if I really had to pick two things. And when we adopt the growth mindset, we're comfortable taking these risks, we're comfortable taking the initiative, but we're collaborating, we're communicating at this really high level. And it involves serious critical thinking around whatever program you're trying to implement. And I would say mistakes, my biggest mistake, because that's where we learn from, is going to be implementing sustainability initiatives without a reward or a recognition or some type of challenge set up for those that are going to be a part of it. And if I could turn back the clock, I would do things a lot differently in that department, and fixing it as I move forward now. And then when I say executive and kind of stakeholder buy-in, I don't mean just like they sign off on something. It's got to be loud and proud and vocalized at the highest level, so everybody understands how serious these initiatives are to the company as a whole and what the company represents.
Amazing. Thank you. Jenny I, very close, obviously intimately involved in the food service operator perspective on this. What kind of concerns do you see coming up from folks in your specific
I mean, to get
position?
down to, I guess to get down to real, like, day to day, what do we think the challenges are going to be? And these are conversations that we've had with your team, Rich, and obviously with our clients as well. But disruption to service, delivery issues, picking up issues, pests, ultimately with waste being left around till the end of the day, for example. Those are really kind of like, digging in and like day-to-day concerns that have been talked about in terms of the operation and how we're going to, shift from what we're doing now to introducing Redish. So I think, I don't know the answers to those yet until we start to go through it next week. But there's some of the concerns that have come up through conversations with our clients and with facilities and janitorial. And I think just being open about communication. And to Jenny G's point, we are going to make mistakes, and it's about learning from those mistakes and reacting from them, and collaborating as a team. And ultimately, we're all working towards the same goal here. So it's just about continuing to talk through that and share your experiences and move forward.
Great. Ushma, do you have anything to add to either of those as far as concerns you've seen pop up?
Yes, recently we've had some, obviously COVID concerns. And so I think I'm unclear how much of the bounce back is, but my comment always is, oh, you don't go to a restaurant to eat. And then, people say, oh, but I get it. If you're running the program, that maybe they don't want to feel like they're running a program that leads. And we do give them the information that if you have a good quality program and you're sanitizing everything, it's fine. And it's no different than going to a restaurant, but something to be continued to be monitored.
Yeah, and I guess one of the, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but one other thing that just came into my brain in terms of concerns, and I think this is probably something that everybody spoke about as well, is the containers disappearing. And they're like, oh, I need some more Tupperware or whatever it is for my house. This is great. I'm just going to take this home. And I think, that's definitely been a concern within my conversations around just them disappearing. But I think, there's only so many things people can really take home, you would like to think. And I think from what Rich has explained and his team in the past, they see that initially to begin with, and then it kind of levels off pretty quickly afterwards. But yeah, that was the only other thing that I can think of that would be a concern.
Yeah.
And different products have different, like cutlery goes missing way more than maybe plates in it. So where did the forks go? There's actually a research paper on that, but.
Yeah.
Well, I just, Rich, I just don't want to forget to say one thing, that Ushma, your comment about, well, do you go out to eat at a restaurant, right? When there's all of these concerns about COVID and safety, if you're looking to use Redish or a company like Redish, if you look behind Rich right now, there is no washing machine in any restaurant that is disinfecting your plate or your silverware the way that machine is. It's just not possible. Everybody probably listening in right now knows a bit about dishwashers, and that is the queen of all kings of all queens. So something also to keep in mind, I think, when trying to pitch it or sell it out.
Thanks. And I didn't pay any of our panelists today to say nice things about us and our equipment, but seems to be going quite well so far. Just kidding. Related to that, I realized I kind of forgot to ask one question, and this is, so two things kind of together. It's like, how do you overcome these concerns when you're thinking about, implementing a program, planning it, and like, what options have you looked at, and that's just not how do we do reusables overall, but like, which, was there an exploration of, for example, cutlery, right? And ramekins and plates and bowls, like, what were kind of the suite of things you kind of looked at or have looked at, if that makes sense, in reusables? And I'll start with Ushma there, because she's seen a lot of different sites.
So, and I do talk to a lot of companies about reusables, and I would have to say it's less about like the item itself. It's what's been interesting is I've been working a lot more with consumer behavior experts. So folks who have a PhD in behavior science, to think about what are the nudges that we put into place or the interventions to get people, to do things differently. Be it in terms of how close a return bin is to the item, or where's the signage, what does the person at the cash register say when you take your purchase, what are the incentives, what are the signs, how easy it is. A lot of it is about, a behavior change, like going away from picking up something that is a single-use item that you then toss, to picking up, and I think in most of these places still have a single-use item and a takeaway, right? Because people, and a reusable item, because maybe there's someone who's taking it and leaving the building. So you need to incentivize people or nudge people to actually ask for the reusables unless you've completely taken it away. And then you need to incentivize people to return it. And that's really is a behavior change. There are some process and operational changes, but we talk a lot about what is the behavior change we need to do. What's the communication? How do you make it easy? And what are the incentives and rewards?
Got it. Does anyone else want to add on to what Ushma just said? So,
I communicate. If I could go back to when we launched many of our sustainability initiatives, I would have made the communications have as little words as possible. And just really kind of punchy in the face communications, because the truth is people are busy, right? We're all busy, we're not reading. So those are some big changes we've made, and they've worked very much. And also in the communications, showing the data, right? So something Redish does and something that we do in our food services is showing the data of what percentage was returned last week, and then almost shaming people in a way without them being shamed. And that kind of getting people to feel like they're doing something together as a group, I think, is also really important.
we like to say, social pressure rather than shaming. But yeah, it's pretty much what it is, right? It's like, well, everyone else is doing this.
I mean, I'm
probably
a
should
Puerto
get on board as
Rican.
well.
Yeah, a Puerto Rican Italian from Brooklyn. The word shame, Game of Thrones fan, shame. But like,
Right.
all I've been is guilted my entire life. So yeah, no, shaming works. But yeah, social pressure is a
Yes.
little bit better.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to move us on a little bit. We're so far so good with timing. So this is a interesting one. I think Jenny G, we'll try to start with you on this one. It's a hard question. How do you or your organization, how do you define success for a reusable program, or the switch from single use to reusables?
I think it depends on the stakeholder, right? And who you're dealing with, how you define success. How I define success amongst my Flick team and the Think Zero team and our Disney cast members is basically the rate of return, right? The less shrinkage, the better impact that we're having on the environment. That's very clear data. And for me, that's it. A lot of people look at it, and I saw some questions in the chat of, how does it work with disposables versus reusables, right? The ROI, your return on investment, you just have to invest up front, and you're gonna see you're actually saving money once you get the program up and running. And that's a great question that all the financial people will ask. And it's an easy sell on that end. And then culture, right? Your clients, you're trying to get them on board to doing something better, right? To be on the right side of things, to do the right thing. So those are, for me, the three main things, for sure.
Thank you. Jenny I or Ushma, do you want to, same question to you? What do you think successful? And Jenny I, you'll find, have you defined it yet, or are you going to define it as you go?
Yeah, no, I think everything Jenny G just said is 100%. I would agree 100% with. And I think from me, in terms of, what I know my clients' expectations are, it's just the guest experience. They want that to continue to be completely seamless. And I think, the communication and the buy-in from the leadership, and then, drilling that down to everybody else. I think that for me is what would measure success. But everything else as well, I agree with what Jenny G had to say.
Thank you. I'm going to dig in. Yeah, same. I'm going to dig in. Jenny I, do you, well, this is really for any of you. Do any of the organizations you work for now, or Ushma, have you seen any that are measuring, customer experience in their food service operation, whether it's surveys or focus groups, or is there data yet, on quality, overall experience, so you could benchmark before and after, or every year, to see what the experience is like for, say, employees in a large office building, right? Are they happy with all their amenities, right? Are they happy with food service? Are they happy with their cubicle or, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
right? Do you see people tracking that? It's just, that's not on my list,
Specifically
but
on
I am incredibly
reusables?
curious about that.
Specifically on reusables? Or
Not on
just-
reusables in general, but just like satisfaction with, food service, satisfaction with their work, work amenities, whatever it may be, like rating of their employees' sustainability behavior as a company, any of these things. I was just wondering if you've seen that kind of information being measured at all, practically speaking, on the ground, because it's talked about a lot in academics and reports, and we see like, oh, people have improved dining experiences, all these other things. But I was just curious, it takes a lot of time and effort to measure those things. So I really just wanted to ask if you've seen anyone doing it yet.
We have in different ways across different states and different, clientele. And I think receiving real-time feedback is really important. And I think we encourage that a lot. And again, provide incentives to get that feedback so that we know, ultimately, we want to know that our guests are coming in and are happy and are going to continue to use us. And if they're not, why not? So I think that's something that we actively do a lot of. And I think, the shift over the last couple of years, and I'll talk from business dining and the corporate offices, as everybody's probably seeing and feeling, not that many people are coming back, or not that many people are coming back into the office that were there pre-COVID, shall we say. And so I think you will probably start to see a lot more feedback around amenities and what can we do to get your guests back in the, to get your employees back in the building so that they truly feel the value of coming in. And I think, dining has been, but over the last 2 years predominantly has really shown just how important that is for a culture, collaboration, feeling good environment.
I have clients who measure, but not specifically on reusables, but they do on their dining experience.
Got it. Jenny G, do you want to add to that at all, or we can, okay. We are right on time to either have, yeah, I want to ask this one more question, and then we can get the Q&A, because I think it's a good one, right? So, we talked a little bit about the context of large food service operations that we're talking about today, but there are many others, right? Whether it's stadiums or you can think of, there's a million different situations. What do you think would be the same, if you're implementing in some of these other situations, and what, if you go to a stadium versus a workplace cafeteria, for example, or what would be different? I recognize there's people probably in the audience that are not specifically working on, workplace cafeterias in K through 12 schools specifically. So I'm just trying to understand, like, what would kind of translate, in your opinion, out there.
Well, I'm working with some larger arenas. Couple of things. One, I think when you're working with your own employees and staff, there's might be a little bit more control or ability to pressure and shame. But I know I work with one organization where if you put any branding of that organization on that cup or cutlery, it'll probably end up on Etsy, whatever, eBay or wherever it is to sell, or it becomes like a collectible item. So there are larger reuse organizations out there that have started to put in a barcode or a SKU, so you're checking in and out. There is that opportunity. Then yes, you do get the cup, but then you have to return the cup to get that money back. The flip side is that some of these places are already paying a lot of money for stuff, and then you're going to charge them more for this cup, for the soda. We're working through what are the optics around that as well. So that I think is one. And two, when you're in a larger organization with maybe lots of different cultures, perspectives on waste, what you do with it, just how do you communicate what it is you're trying to do and encourage people to adopt the system that you are putting in place, right? And you have to do it in many different ways. Maybe it's through an app and the language and a person at the table, and treat 10 top tables and stuff like that. So I think those are the communication, the language branding and then the actual getting the return back in a way that is meaningful is probably different in a larger stadium than say at a food service. But there are some very large organizations that have done it, especially with cups and stuff at concerts and arenas. But it's all about the SKU return.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It is one thing when you have people who go to work with each other every day and know the system and environment versus where you have 100,000 different people every week coming in, right? There's no habit involved there. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. All right, well, I would love to get the Q&A, I think. So I'm going to invite my colleague, Nicole, to, start your video. Thank you, right on cue. This is Nicole. She's one of our client success managers, and she has been tracking the Q&A and chat. And Nicole, why don't you ask us the tough ones? I mean, the best ones.
The best ones, yes. Jenny G, you did talk about this a little bit, but I think it would be worth expanding if we could about cost differentiation and how we are looking at ROI from reusables compared to single use. There seems to be a lot of questions around that particular.
As much as I feel like I've become a semi-expert on this, I'm going to have to kick it to the actual expert, Ushma, to answer how companies or organizations can begin to dive into that.
Sure, on the cost perspective, right? So I think the first thing that we do is understand the baseline cost, which is not only around purchasing of the single-use items, but we also take into account, and this is a trickier part, is all the labor associated with it as well, right? So what's the labor around the single use? We try to quantify it also into the hauling costs, and then, the purchasing. So that's kind of like the baseline. And then in terms of thinking about it for reusables, we obviously have to talk about what is the cost of the program. Here at Redish, I call Redish dishwashing as a service, a DOS, kind of you hear sauce and everything else. But so you could have a dishwashing as a service program, but you could also buy your own and have the program in-house. And so we have to kind of just get that cost, get the cost of the materials if you're buying it in-house, cost of dishwashers, cost of labor, cost of shrinkage. We also did cost of running around the campus, finding it and putting it in, because like people take their plate and cup and they go to their floor and eat their food and then they kind of just shove it somewhere. So we have people, who are scavengers searching for stuff. And then bringing it back down. So that's a full-time person actually, is one person, because if you have a really big 4 or 5 buildings, can you imagine how many hours it takes to take that little cart around, put it down? So that's a full-time person who's union with benefits, salary. So you got to put all of that cost in. So we do that. And then, then it's like a basic ROI. And then as Think Zero, we like to layer in all of their ESG and sustainability goals. Well, publicly, you have talked about this. This is how you could share this, share this program in your reports. What I talked about earlier, being visually or dimensionalizing the data. And then also, how do we think it'll impact the data that you are reporting? So we also look at the report and say, you're reporting this, and we think this is how it can go down. So there is an ROI, but more and more these days, especially with very large companies who have public ESG goals, we pull the data. I can't quantify that from a financial perspective, but I can quantify from a perspective of that you can meet that goal or you can put that into a report. And I am finding more and more companies are really value that. There is some value in being able to put something into their report.
I'm going to follow up on that. Yeah, no, that is brilliant. And this could be for anyone to follow up on that. Has the supply chain disruption, changed that equation drastically or a little bit or somewhat over the last year, presumably in favor of reusables? And have you seen it easier, to have that conversation because of the supply chain issues? Anyone?
Not only supply chain, right? You have the dramatic increase in costs of the disposables of food, right, Jenny? I'm sure you're seeing your food costs. I've never seen anything like this in decades.
Right.
It's just so important, right? Ushma said there's like qualitative versus the quantitative. And on the top of everyone's shareholders reports are usually their ESG, their DEI, what they're doing around that. It's leveraging those goals as well as the stuff that's just hard data. And now we have both. So in regards to supply chain, things cost a lot more and they're just not arriving. A simple example, and I know my Flick team, my amazing Flick team is here with us. I think we just didn't get napkins for like 2 months. You don't think that that's like, doesn't sound like a big deal. It's a really big deal in food service. It's like huge. So reusables is the way to go, 100%.
Thank you.
Another good question came from the audience is about the material of the containers. So maybe, Rich, this is for you from a manufacturing perspective, but why did we decide on plastic as opposed to a stainless steel or aluminum?
That question. Okay. Yeah, I'll start by saying it's never an easy decision, and I don't think there is a correct answer 100%, right? You know, our CEO analyzed reusable products for several months on, 20 plus dimensions of their performance and, the economics and everything. And it turned out that our polypropylene container that we use now, it made the most sense when you put all 20 plus variables together. And we also value made in the USA. And so that makes it very difficult to get a stainless steel product if they're just not made in the USA. And one of the concerns there is not just economic patriotism or whatever the correct term for that is, right? Look, yeah, it's also about having visibility into the conditions in the factories where things are made. And with anything overseas, everyone knows it's very hard to have that line of sight into what's actually happening on the ground. And so, keeping it in the USA ensures that it's inspected by up to USA standards. We know what those are. So for us, that was an easier choice than trying to have to understand what other countries' standards might be and what certifications they might have to go through to be up to our, so it gets more complicated. Certainly, I don't think there is a perfect product. We're not committed to petroleum-based polypropylene. If there is a better product that's not made out of petroleum, that's made in the USA, that's available at the right price to make reuse affordable, part of this has to do with coming in with the economic proposition that's not so outrageous that it prevents the change from happening, right? And so there's that advantage to polypropylene as well that we've seen. So those are some of the answers. I will say that our containers also we grind them down if they chip, break, get stained, whatever, they can be ground down and they're made into new polypropylene products because we send them back to the manufacturer. And so don't think that's quite as easy to do with stainless in the US. I don't know what that process is like. I know that recycling stainless and aluminum is more energy intense than recycling plastic. So, it's the full suite of considerations is how we came to our decision, is hopefully the best I can answer that question.
Yeah, I think a good question to the last one I'll say, because we have 5 minutes left, but someone asked a really insightful question about scaling. So there's a lot of smaller companies, local companies that are offering reusable solutions. So maybe the panelists can share, do we think we need to move to a universal reuse network like per city, or would it be better to keep these independent companies? Like, I guess, how do we scale reusables in a thoughtful way is the question. And that's a tough one, but food for thought.
Great question. Yeah. Who's first?
I know we've been thinking about reusables. One organization that I think is doing phenomenal work on reusables and trying to get to the tipping point is Upstream. It's out of the West Coast. And I've, spent some time talking with their director of policy, Sam, around this idea of having city networks. I think to make it convenient and to make it shareable across restaurants, like if you get a container here and you return it there, it just makes it easier, because I think as Jenny said earlier, it's all about convenience and ease. And if it's not convenient and it's not easy, it's really hard to get that uptake. Deliver Zero is a great organization, doing that reusable container work here in New York City. And they've partnered now with Caviar and Uber Eats or Grubhub or one of those, so they're starting to increase that network, because I think there is that recognition that there needs to be scale. I think what people individually can do is call their favorite local place and let them know that this is an option. And if they have Caviar, they have Grubhub, like go to this person there, and they, maybe you can come on. There's lots of great organizations trying to do this at scale. I think it's just about more people asking for it and trying it out. But I 100% believe it needs to be interoperability is how it's going to scale.
Great answer. I'll add to that, just because we work on the operational end of cleaning all of this, is that the fewer the SKUs, the better from an operational cost standpoint, right? Like it's same with refillable beer bottles, right? Big breweries, I'm sure, would be happy to do it, but they can't get 14 different kinds of bottles back, right? Like all the brewers would have to kind of share the same SKU for the most part to make the system really, really efficient economically and environmentally. So I think that's spot on.
My business partner, Sarah, just dropped a chat in about a scaling network in Boulder. So check it out.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. We're at 1:58, 2 minutes of, and so Ushma, do you want to plug your panel real quick before we go? In 15 seconds.
Oh yes, we have another panel in person, you guys, in New York City. IRL is the new term that everyone is shouting out. IRL. It's downtown around 6 p.m. today. It's with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Think Zero, and Donate NYC, and we'll be focusing on food waste and food donations, because food waste is 35% of New York City's waste stream. And so if we can do more to donate and do more to rescue and do more to compost, that would be great for everyone.
Excellent. And Nicole reminded me that she's actually hosting something, Circular City Week New York. It's a lot of fun, lots going on. What do you have going on, Nicole?
Yeah, so tomorrow we have the power of reuse in a circular economy. It's at Arc'teryx in Soho. So I'll have Lauren Sweeney from Deliver Zero. I'll have Nina from Diaper Kind, Donate NYC, and we have Rafael Espinal as well joining us for a panel tomorrow evening.
Thank you. And I know we all have to go. I will say there is as far as scalable reuse systems, there is a organization, newish, Perpetual, with my friend and colleague Ellie Moss and some other cool people, and they'll be talking about that this week. So you have to look it up. I don't have the link, sorry, but it's they're doing a cool talk. So thank you all so much to our panelists and to our attendees for listening. I learned a lot. I hope you all did too. And have a great rest of your Circular City Week, New York.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.